All right, so get this. Today we are going deep on something pretty different, debt collection in Spain.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And now, before you think, oh no, this is going to be some boring law lecture, trust me, this is way more interesting than it sounds.
Okay.
We are taking a peek inside this Spanish firm. They are called, get this, MCHM Abogados.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
And they are experts in this process called proceso monitorio.
Proceso monitorio.
Yeah, have you ever heard of it?
I can't say that I have not unless I have spent some time in Spanish legal circles.
Yeah, it's pretty niche, but it's actually a really clever system for getting back money that you were owed.
Oh,
For specific types of debt, of course.
Makes sense.
So think of it like a fast track through all those court battles.
A shortcut.
Yeah, exactly. So probably not for, when friend borrows $5 and forgets to pick you back.
Right, not for those small claims.
Yeah, probably not the best tool for that.
So proceso monitorio is really designed for those clear-cut situations. Unpaid invoices, overdue rent, things where it's very obvious how much is owed.
Gotcha. So very specific.
Exactly.
So what makes this process so special? Like, why wouldn't someone just go through the usual channels?
Well, you see, the whole point is that it's much faster and more efficient
Okay.
than traditional court proceedings.
So it really cuts through all that red tape.
It does, but, and this is a big but, it only applies to debts that meet 4 very specific criteria.
Oh, okay. Lay it on me. What are these magical 4 criteria?
All right, so first up, you have to have a debt that is what they call liquida.
Liquida.
Yeah, it means it has a very definite monetary value.
Okay.
So think like a fixed amount on an invoice, not some sort of vague estimate.
Right. So it has to be very clear.
Exactly. It's all about making things very straightforward right from the start.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you need to know exactly how much is owed. So what's next?
All right, so the second criteria is what they call determinata.
Determinate.
Yeah, and this basically means that the amount owed is fixed and everyone agrees on it. Like there's no wiggle room.
Okay.
So it can't be something that's like still being negotiated.
Right.
Or that might change down the line.
It's set in stone.
Yes, exactly. And this really helps to prevent those arguments about like, oh, well, I don't actually owe that much.
Makes sense. So we have a fixed amount. It's clearly stated. What else?
All right, so number 3 is vencida.
Vencida.
And that simply means that the due date for the payment, it has already passed.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, so you can't use this process if the payment isn't technically late.
So no jumping the gun just because you are impatient.
Exactly. And then finally, the debt needs to be exigible.
Exigible.
Yes, and that means that there are no outstanding conditions or reasons, like absolutely no reason that the payment should be made.
Okay.
No strings attached, basically. The money's due.
Gotcha. So I'm seeing a pattern here. It's all about keeping things very clear, undisputed. So if you have a debt that ticks all of these boxes, then proceso monitorio could be like your go-to solution.
You got it.
Okay, so now I'm really curious, what kind of proof lies in this process? Because in my head, I'm picturing mountains of legal paperwork.
Oh, yeah.
Really intense contracts. So is that what we were talking about, or is it something different?
Well, I mean, formal contracts are definitely valid.
Okay.
But proceso monitorio, it also considers other things like invoices, delivery receipts.
Oh, wow.
Even telegrams.
Telegrams. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that one gives you a little glimpse into how business used to operate in Spain.
Yeah. So old school.
Yeah. But, and here's another little interesting tidbit. Even unilateral documents from the creditor can be used as evidence.
Unilateral. Wait, so something created by the person who was owed the money?
Exactly.
Not like a joint agreement?
Exactly.
Oh, that's interesting.
So think of it like a standard invoice template that a company uses.
Okay.
If that's been their consistent practice in their business relationship, then it can be used.
So even without a formal contract, there's ways to show that a debt is legit. Exactly.
And a good example of this, something a lot of people can relate to, is the mention of unpaid community fees.
Oh, yeah, community living. That's something so many people deal with. HOA fees, maintenance charges. Sometimes those payments just slip through the cracks.
Right. And so if those fees are clearly outlined, they're past due, and there's no dispute about the amount,
yeah,
proceso monitorio could be a way to get that money back.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's say I'm owed money, and this whole proceso monitorio thing seems like the way to go. What's the next step? Do I just storm into court, waving my invoices around like a flag?
No, not quite.
Okay.
There's a very specific application process.
Okay.
And knowing how it works is really crucial.
All right, so walk me through it. What does this application actually look like? What needs to be included?
Well, first and foremost, accuracy is key.
Okay.
So the application needs detailed information about both the creditor, that's the person who is owed the money, and the debtor, the person who owes the money.
Gotcha.
And it's all about being clear and transparent right from the get-go.
Yeah, you can't just throw around accusations.
Exactly. You need to break down the debt itself, so the exact amount owed, what it's for, and provide all the supporting documentation. This is where those invoices and telegrams or whatever proof you have comes in handy.
Okay, so it's like you're laying all your cards on the table. Here's what you owe me. Here's the proof.
Precisely.
No funny business.
And then, of course, there are some, legal bits to include, like the legal basis for the claim. But thankfully, that's where the experts at MCHM Abogados come in, right?
Right. We are aiming for a clear understanding here, not for a law school exam.
Exactly. And then finally, the application needs to be signed either by the creditor or their legal representative, and then it's off to the court.
Okay, so the application's submitted. What happens next? Does the court automatically side with the creditor and just issue a payment order?
Well, not so fast.
Okay.
The debtor actually has a chance to respond.
Oh.
The court will notify them of the claim, and then the clock starts ticking.
And how long do they have to respond?
They get 20 days.
20 days, okay.
And during that time, they can choose to pay the debt in full, dispute the claim, or do nothing.
And I have a feeling doing nothing is not the wisest move here.
You're absolutely right. Ignoring the claim is basically like pleading guilty.
Oh, wow.
It means they are forfeiting their right to contest the debt, and that can have some serious consequences.
Okay, so let's walk through the potential outcomes here. So outcome number one, the debtor pays up within those 20 days. Simple enough, right?
Exactly. That's the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
The debt is settled, it's quick, it's efficient, there's no drawn-out legal battle, everyone's happy.
Perfect. But what if the debtor decides to either ghost the court or wants to fight the claim? What happens then?
Well, it would be nice, but it's not quite that simple.
Okay.
What the court does is they issue what they call a decreto. Yeah, and that's essentially like a legal stamp of approval from the court saying, yep, this debt seems legit.
Okay.
And the debtor hasn't even bothered to argue against it.
So it's not a guarantees payment, but it definitely gives the creditor some leverage.
Oh, absolutely. It shifts the burden of proof onto the debtor.
Oh, I see.
So now it's up to them to prove they don't owe the money.
Okay.
Rather than the creditor having to, endlessly chase after them.
So if the debtor still doesn't respond, what kind of actions can the creditor take with this decreto?
Well, it basically opens the door to more assertive debt collection methods.
Like what?
Well, things like wage garnishment.
Oh, wow.
Where part of the debtor's salary goes directly towards paying the debt.
Okay.
Or even seizing assets like bank accounts or property, depending on, how much is owed.
Wow. Okay, so ignoring that initial claim can really backfire.
It can.
Processo monitorio is really designed to encourage debtors to take their payment obligations seriously.
It is. But that doesn't mean it's a one-sided system that completely disregards, the debtor's rights.
Right.
There are mechanisms in place for them to challenge the claim.
Okay, good. So let's back up a bit to that 20-day response window.
Yeah.
What happens if the debtor does want to fight the claim? How do they go about doing that?
Well, in that case, they would file what's called an opposition.
An opposition?
Yeah, basically it's a formal statement saying, I disagree with this claim, and here's why.
So it's not just a matter of saying, nope, don't feel like paying it.
Right.
They need to have, solid grounds for disputing the debt.
Exactly. They might argue that they've already paid the debt, that the amount is wrong, or maybe there's some legal technicality that makes the debt invalid.
Okay.
But they need to provide evidence to back up their argument.
I imagine that's where things can get a little more complicated, legally speaking.
It can, yeah. Once an opposition is filed, the processo monitorio essentially goes on hold.
Okay.
And the case might shift to a more traditional court process.
So it's like that fast track lane. It merges back into the regular flow of the legal system.
You could say that.
Okay.
At that point, both the creditor and debtor would have a chance to present their case to the court, with all the evidence, all the legal arguments, and the court would make a decision.
So processo monitorio acts like a filter. It streamlines those cases where the debt is very clear-cut.
Yes.
But if a genuine dispute pops up, it allows for a more in-depth legal process.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. It's really trying to balance efficiency with fairness.
Yeah.
After all, most debts are probably, legitimate.
Right.
But there are always those situations that need a closer look.
And in those more complex cases, having the right legal guidance on your side becomes even more important.
Absolutely. Whether you're the one trying to collect the money or the one being pursued for it, understanding proceso monitorio and how the Spanish legal system works, it can make a huge difference in the outcome.
Well, I've definitely learned a lot about debt collection in Spain today. This whole proceso monitorio system is surprisingly fascinating.
It's designed to be quite effective, and it really makes you wonder, like, how other countries handle these situations.
Right. Do they have similar systems that prioritize speed and efficiency?
Yeah.
Or do they kind of stick with those more traditional, drawn-out court proceedings?
That's a great question, and one we might explore in a future deep dive.
Ooh, I like that.
But for now, I think we've given our listener a good grasp of how things work in Spain.
I agree, and it really highlights how important it is to understand the legal systems that are in place.
Yes.
Especially if you're doing business or living in another country.
Exactly. What might seem like a simple transaction
Right.
can become really complex if a dispute arises.
So before we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listener about proceso monitorio or just debt recovery in general? Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for our listener today is that, like, wow, legal systems can be so different.
Oh, yeah?
And proceso monitorio, it's a really good example of a process that is built for speed, built for efficiency, which might be surprising to some people.
It is definitely different than what a lot of people think of when they think of, the law and legal proceedings.
Right.
It really shows that a system can adapt to meet very specific needs.
Yeah.
In this case, it's addressing those, like, really straightforward debt cases where it's just like, okay, let's settle this quickly and fairly.
And it's not just for, huge companies chasing after invoices.
Right.
It's for a variety of situations like those community fees we talked about.
Exactly.
So it really can apply to a wide range of people.
It can, yeah, whether you're dealing with a business transaction, a landlord-tenant issue, or even those community fees, understanding proceso monitorio can be really helpful.
It's like a secret weapon in your legal toolkit.
Yeah.
But of course, we're not saying that everyone should go around filing claims, all the time.
Of course not, but knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Understanding how the system works can really empower people, businesses, to protect themselves.
Right.
And to seek resolution in a way that is effective. It also helps you to avoid costly mistakes or delays.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into proceso monitorio, what's that one thing you want our listener to walk away with?
I think for me, it's the importance of looking beyond, like, your own familiar legal landscape.
Okay.
Different countries, different cultures, they approach legal matters in very different ways.
Yeah.
And what may seem strange or unusual at first glance, it might actually be a really effective solution.
It reminds us that there is always something new to learn. There is always something new to discover.
Always.
Even within something like legal systems.
Right. And it really encourages us to ask questions, to compare different approaches. Is proceso monitorio a unique Spanish solution?
Right.
Or are there other similar expedited processes in other places?
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons? All those things are really good to think about.
Those are great questions for our listener to ponder.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe these will inspire some new deep dives in the future. Until then, thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of Spanish debt recovery. And as always, keep those minds curious.